Hey, everybody, we are going to talk about a stock that recently went public. I know the term IPO kind of died down after the 2021-ish SPAC boom went away, but there are still some companies going public. One of them is Viking River Cruises. Ticker symbol is VIK. I'm a big cruising fan. I've never sailed on a Viking ship. We're going to dive into this in just a second. Rick Munarriz is joining me. He is very familiar with the company. So before we dive in, check out the link you see on your screen, fool.com/Frankel. You get the top 10 stocks to buy right now from the Motley Fool. It's the best way to support this work we're doing here on YouTube. Again, that is fool.com/Frankel. So as I just mentioned, I'm a pretty avid cruiser. There's actually a receipt for the next Royal Caribbean cruise I'm taking right over my shoulder there. I didn't plan that. It just happened to be there because I recently booked one. I'm a very, very avid cruiser. Viking does things a little differently. So the main cruise lines that you think of, especially the publicly traded ones, are Royal Caribbean. You have Carnival Cruise Lines, which both of those have a bunch of different sub-brands. There's also Norwegian Cruise Lines. They all, generally, for lack of a better explanation, build big ships and take them out in the ocean with people on them. They have several. They're small ships. The smallest Carnival ship I've ever been on is one of their smallest in their fleet. It still holds well over 2,000 people. It sails to Caribbean islands. They do Alaska cruises. They do cruises around Europe. Their boats cannot fit down, say, the Mississippi River. Like, that would not be feasible in a Carnival ship. As cool as I think it would be, it's just not the way it goes. So that's what Viking does. Viking, they focus on smaller ships. Their fleet is much larger than any of the three I just mentioned. They have 92 ships in their fleet, but their ships generally hold between 80 and 190 people. They're not that big in terms of cruise ship sizes. So they can go places that other ships can't, specifically rivers, hence the name Viking River Cruises. So they're pretty new to the public markets. They're a smaller company than the other cruise lines. Just for perspective, their revenue is about 1/3 of what Royal Caribbean's is. But they're growing fast. They've been a very resilient business in the past few years. Rick, I know you're a big cruise line stock fan. We did a video on other cruise lines a couple weeks ago. Why has Viking kind of crept onto your radar so soon after it's gone public?
Yeah, so again, I always love IPOs, and I know that most of the IPOs are underwater at some point. Not to use underwater as a cruise thing, because there's obviously even more negative connotation with that. But it's IPOs are very risky. But sometimes you get a stock like a Viking that went public at 24 back at the end of April, the last day of April, it hit the market, and it is the kind of thing where it makes sense. It's profitable. It's doing a lot of things right. And again, it dominates a market. So yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, they're basically about a quarter the size of Carnival, about half the size of NCL, and yeah, about a third of the price of revenue of the size of Royal Caribbean. But yeah, it's the whole thing, this unique product where it's these river boats. So I haven't been on a Viking cruise either. So, and I think the cruise demographic for a Viking is it's 55 plus, affluent. Because you're paying more than $7,000 per person to cruise, to take one of these, week long or whatever. Some of them are longer, shorter. The average is about $7,000, a little more than $7,000 per person. A lot more than you're going to be paying on a Carnival, Royal Caribbean, on their flagship lines, and NCL as well. They do have it's a Carnival Seabourn. They have some smaller cruise lines that cater to the luxury market, but not the riverboat market. And this is, they're small boats. The initially ones just like 90 people, maybe 180 and 200. It's not going to be like the cruise line where you have 800 places to eat and all these big daring shows and all these different entertainment options. They're not going to be a roller coaster like you have on some on Carnival or some Disney water coaster cruise ships. It's a very intimate experience, but that's what they want. They all want to just hang out by the veranda or hang out in public, just socialize with like-minded people, going through these like the Mississippi, the Rhine, the Seine. In France, if you saw the Olympics, you go, oh, I want to check that out. See if the water is as bad as they say it is. You can do it on a Viking cruise. So it's a market that pretty much they practically dominate. So North American outbound market, and by this I mean it's people from the North America that are booking a cruise, anywhere in river market, and most of about 2/3 of their trips are in Europe. That's where most of the cruise Viking business happens. 51% of the market. It's a dominant piece, and because of that, because they are the top brand, they also have a lot of great. More than half of their reservations are people calling in directly to Viking. It's not even going through travel agents or portals or anything that they have to pay commission. It's all this. They have this amazingly massive. They're old school even in their advertising, and that's basically just mass mail. Like it's maybe you've received the Viking Cruise thing. Obviously, they have their list of passengers that's been there, but that's where they spend their money. They get these beautiful brochures in there, and you make, wow, I really want to do this at one point. Then you call in and you say, oh, this is the price. Then sticker shock happens. But for people that do it, they tend to love it. Great ratings. Condé Nast, they have their annual rankings. They are the leader as far as reputation goes. So they sort of had this market cornered in a market that's it's an invisible moat, because anyone can, you see, these are tiny boats. Anyone could build tiny boats. You think Carnival's the one with the bigger moat with the large boats, but Royal Caribbean, NCL, they play that same game. You aren't going to find too many people willing to take Viking on. The nearest competitor has 18% of the market, northbound, outbound market. And again, these are, even though they're cruising all over the world, the cruise programming is all done in English. So basically, it's the American, Australian, UK. That's their primary market, because you don't have the luxury of having programming in all these different languages on a boat with basically 200 people. So it's a very thin market, very special market, but it's something that's growing really well for Viking right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the whole trend throughout the entire cruising industry, other than Viking, has been the ship is the destination. Years ago when cruises first started being popular, the Carnival ships, they were nice, but they were vehicles. They were designed to, they might have a restaurant, they might have a small casino or something like that, but generally they were a vehicle to take you to a bunch of different destinations. And gradually over the past, decade and a half, especially, the trend has been toward the ship is the destination. Royal Caribbean especially is a big example of this. They just launched the Utopia of the Seas. That's what that receipt's for, actually. It is only doing 3 and 4 night trips. They go to Nassau, where honestly at Nassau about half the people stay on the boat, just because there's more. In a lot of ways, there's more to do on the boat than there is in Nassau. Viking, the ship is a vehicle, and then they're still a destination-oriented place. Their whole, in my mind, their biggest sales pitch and their biggest advantage over the other ones, Carnival, Royal, Norwegian, they can all go to Nassau. They can all go to some of the other big ports. They can all go to Cozumel. They can all do, they can't go to random towns along the Mississippi River. They just can't. So that seems to be a really kind of unique advantage that I honestly couldn't name the number 2 company that does that. I'm sure I could look it up, but I cannot do that off the top of my head. So that
I'll tell you, it's AMA, 18% of the market, and I have never heard of them.
I've never heard of them, but I've heard of Viking because, like you said, they send me mailers. They can see that I've taken a dozen Royal Caribbean and Carnival trips, and they probably buy a mailing list from some travel agents, and my wife gets those. She said, "Why don't we try one of these?" So maybe at some point we will. But it's a really interesting company, one to watch. Rick, thank you so much for joining me and giving us a rundown on this really unique cruise line.